Last week I had the great privilege of joining the Australian Strategic Policy Institute in Tel Aviv as a participant in the inaugural Beersheba dialogue between ASPI and the Begin Sadat Centre for Strategic Studies. It was my first visit to the Middle East, and it was an extraordinary, eye-opening time to be there during the current period of regional upheaval and transition. You can only learn so much from books and maps, as this visit absolutely demonstrated to me. The Australian delegation included ASPI staff, ably led by Anthony Bergen, the Australian Ambassador, Dave Sharma, my parliamentary colleagues, Gai Brotman, the member for Canberra, and the Honourable Mark Dreyfus MP, the Shadow Attorney-General. It also included Mr Alan Gingell, Major General Gus McLaughlin and Major General Jim Molan, retired. The Israeli delegation was led by Professor Ephraim Inbar, the irrepressible director of the Begin Sadat Institute. It included esteemed academics such as Dr Max Singer, founder of the Hudson Institute, and a wide range of senior military and civilian representatives of the Israeli government and the Israeli Defence Force. But most fittingly, this dialogue was named in honour of the famous charge of the Australian 4th Light Horse Brigade. The Australian Embassy organised two wonderfully memorable commemoration ceremonies in Beersheba, at the Commonwealth War Grave Cemetery and at the Park of the Australian Soldier. This most famous of battles is not widely known today amongst many Australians, but it was a decisive turning point in the First World War, so I'd like to take a few moments to share the story with you. 98 years ago, in October 1917, the outcome of the First World War was in no way preordained. At that time, the failure of the Dardanelles campaign, a military catastrophe in Mesopotamia, the setbacks in the Western Front had all combined to greatly damage the Allies' morale. The Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany were all holding fast. Two Allied attempts to break the Turkish defensive line running from Gaza on the coast to Beersheba, 43 kilometres inland, had failed, and the town of Beersheba itself remained in the hands of the Ottoman Empire. A last desperate push was required if Beersheba and its critically important 7 wells were to be captured. It was essential to the success of General Allenby's campaign plan, the commander of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. And so it was at 4:30 in the afternoon on the 31st of October, the 4th and 12th Light Horse Regiments of the 4th Brigade drew up behind a ridge some 4 miles south-east of Beersheba, and they moved off. Following close behind were supporting forces from the 11th Light Horse Regiment and from the 5th and 7th Mounted Brigades. Facing sustained enemy fire, but moving fast, the mounted infantry quickly fell upon enemy lines. They jumped the trenches, they dismounted, and then entered the trenches on foot, clearing them with both rifle and bayonet. Though outnumbered, the momentum and the sheer audacity of this surprise attack carried them through the Turkish defences. The light horsemen took less than an hour to overrun these trenches and finally successfully enter Beersheba. The city was captured by nightfall, and the Gaza-Beersheba defensive line was finally broken. It was a success and the desperation of the charge late in the day and by mounted infantry, not mounted cavalry, that has earned it an enduring place in Australian and also in the history of the First World War. Their success was not only due to their courage, but also to their ability to take the initiative, take risks and be disruptive, characteristics that have continued to serve our nation well in successive generations of servicemen and women, and is today seen in our innovators and our entrepreneurs. At the Beersheba Dialogue, Major General Molan reflected on a question he, and many of us in this place, are often asked. Why does Australia get itself involved so often in other people's wars? The simple fact is we get involved as it is in our national interest to do so. Our national interests extend well beyond our sea borders. Australian military involvement in the Middle East continues today, and it is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Today, 1,700 ADF personnel are deployed in the Middle East on 7 separate operations. On my visit to Beersheba, I met Defence personnel at the Beersheba ceremonies serving in 2 long-standing regional operations. Firstly, Operation Paladin, which supports UNSTO, which itself was established in 1948 to supervise the truce agreed at the conclusion of the First Arab-Israeli War. Since 1956, members of the Australian contingent have supported UNSTO, with 12 personnel currently on deployment in the Operation Paladin. Secondly, I met personnel from Operation Mazurka, which supports the multinational force and observers, a non-UN organisation which itself was established in 1981 to oversee long-standing regional peace agreements. We currently have 12 military personnel deployed in the Sinai, an increasingly unstable region with the rise of the ISIS-affiliated al-Wilayat Sinai, now speculated to be responsible for the downing of the Russian Metrojet flight. The Beersheba dialogue itself was highly successful, and both delegations discovered there is much to learn from one another. Discussions ranged from counterinsurgency, urban intelligence gathering, coalition warfighting, countering improvised explosive devices, the use of reservists, military procurement processes, and military and civilian resilience. Also in Israel, at the commemorative ceremony, somewhat fittingly, was Minister Roy on leading an innovation delegation. For me, one of the most significant insights from the trip was Israel's success in high-tech innovations, patents and start-ups. Today, Israel generates more start-ups and venture capital investment than Japan, than China, the US, Canada and the UK. And it was very clear to me key to the success of this was the symbiotic link between Israel as a start-up nation and the Israeli Defence Force ecosystem. As a result of this visit, I'm delighted to advise that the Chief Scientist of Israel, Avi Hasson, a world expert on fostering innovation, the ecosystem, has accepted an invitation to address the parliamentary friendship groups that I co-chair with Gay Brotman and also Senator Dio Wong, that is the Defence and Innovation, can't get my words out tonight, Innovation Parliamentary Friendship Groups later this month. I'd like to conclude by thanking ASPI and both the Begin Sadat Institute on the resounding success of this inaugural dialogue. But as we all know in this place, successful events such as these never just happen. They're a result of extensive hard work by many people. So my particular thanks to ASPI. To Peter Jennings, your team did an outstanding job. My particular thanks to Mr Anthony Bergen, your deputy, and also to Mr David Lang, who successfully herded cats all around Israel and contributed to it being such a success. Also, in particular, my particular thanks to AJAC, to Mr Colin Rubenstein, Mr Aaron Shapiro, who also worked very hard to make it the success that it was. And a special acknowledgement and thank you to Mr Zeke Solomon for your companionship and your support. A very special thank you and acknowledgement to our ambassador, Mr David Sharma, and to his team in Tel Aviv. They all provided very dedicated and very professional support, which again greatly contributed to the success of this visit. And lastly, my particular thanks to the Begin Sadat Centre for Strategic Studies, and in particular to Professor Inbar, the Director of the Institute, and to his large team. We hope that you realised as much benefit from this as the Australian delegation did, and we certainly look forward to future delegations and dialogues. Finally, Mr Acting Deputy President, and I think most wonderfully as a result of this delegation, on this eve of Remembrance Day, it was very clear that the legacy and the spirit of our light horsemen, who so distinguished themselves at Beersheba, lives on, lest we forget.